Good morning, everyone. Welcome this morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll get started in just a moment. Good morning. Hope your February 2nd is off to a great start. We'll get started in just a moment. Great. Good morning again. And thank you for joining us. I am Abby Burke, the Western Rivers Regional Program Manager for Audubon Rockies, your webinar host this morning, along with co-host Samantha Grant, our coordinator for Western Rivers. As we begin, I want to extend a round of thanks to you, our audience, and my co-panelists this morning to start your day with us. So just thank you so much for joining us. We're hoping that you're enjoying a coffee or a tea together as we gather online for our legislator-focused discussion on Colorado's proposed stream restoration legislation. Legislators, if you are able, I invite you to identify yourself and say hello to panelists in the chat. And thank you for your service to our great state. Next slide, please. Great. Again, welcome to this morning's webinar. For the smoothness of webinar function and accessibility, attendees have been muted and video sharing has also been disabled to preserve our connectivity. At the close of business yesterday, we had over 280 registrants and we want to preserve our bandwidth. So please add questions to the chat at any time. Time permitting, we will hold question and answer following all of our panelists' presentations. Next slide, please. Audubon looks at landscape conservation through the lens of birds and is invested in healthy watersheds, rivers, and wetlands and working lands for birds and people. We work seamlessly with the Water for Colorado Coalition, as well as the Healthy Headwaters Work Group to pursue goals that build resilience for our freshwater ecosystems and water supplies. We are all connected by water. In Colorado, we collaborate, innovate, and progress together towards our sustainable water future for people and the environment. The future of Colorado is dependent on clean, reliable water coming from healthy rivers and watersheds. These are our natural water supply infrastructure, and each of us are connected by it. Collectively, as a state, from residents to decision makers, we need to lean in, learn more, and participate in the decisions around our water resources. The decisions we make about water, watersheds, and river health impact all of Colorado. Next slide, please. Impacts of climate change are here. As a headwater state, we live these impacts through variable water supply, wildfires, drought, and flooding. Science is showing us the importance of healthy functioning rivers with connected floodplains for direct benefits to people and nature. There is an urgency to act regarding climate change, to keep healthy functioning rivers today and tomorrow, to continue to deliver the water we are used to for people and nature, and to take hold of currently available and competitive federal funding to support watershed and river health. Next slide, please. Stewardship of rivers is key for Colorado's future across all water uses and users. Stream restoration is an important stewardship tool for our watersheds and river systems. The newly approved and released 2023 Colorado Water Plan states, Colorado's watersheds hold the future of our water supply security. The plan recognizes the importance of reconnecting floodplains to waterways and restoring wetlands and riparian habitat along headwater streams to increase drought, fire, and flood resilience and supply environmental benefits, as well as provide clean water supplies for both municipalities and agriculture. Water policy is meant to provide a solution to an issue. I want to thank Department of Natural Resources, and bill sponsors for forward-thinking policy that provides a needed solution to certainty for stream restoration practices that positions Colorado for once-in-a-generation federal funding and a resilient future in the face of climate change. Next slide, please. And with that, I would love to welcome Senator Roberts. Senator Roberts represents District 8 and is the chair of the Senate Agricultural Natural Resources Committee. He's an attorney with demonstrated commitment to mountain and rural communities. During his terms in the legislature, previously Representative and now Senator Roberts has passed bills that have focused on lowering the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs, investing in affordable housing, protecting our environment and water, and finding ways to lower cost of living and promoting rural economic development. He has also earned recognition as one of the most bipartisan and accountable legislators at the Capitol. Senator Roberts, welcome this morning, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on the importance of Colorado's watersheds, rivers, and streams, and opportunities to support them. Welcome.
Thank you, Abby, and thanks everybody for joining this morning. Very honored to have a few moments to speak with you all about this important topic. We all know, anybody who's been paying attention to the legislature so far this year knows that water is on the top of everybody's mind down here at the Capitol, knowing that we have a lot of work to do to protect our water future here within Colorado and ensure that we don't lose or get hurt by things that are happening in other states. I see this concept about stream restoration, if we can do it the right way, in a way to do just that. It's not the only solution, of course. We have to do a lot more, but this is a key part in protecting our watersheds, protecting our healthy streams and rivers, and capitalizing on the incredibly unique and once in a lifetime opportunity to receive funding from the federal government through the Infrastructure Act to do these types of projects so that we can have healthy streams and rivers for decades into the future. Why is this important? Why do we need to do this work? Why should we take this on at the legislature and as a state? I think we all know that healthy natural streams provide a immense benefit to watershed health. They contribute to forest health, wildfire, flood and drought prevention and resilience. They help with our water quality and quantity, and they help with sedimentation and infrastructure. And the benefits are very clear and go on and on. And we know we've had loss, whether it's from wildfire or degradation from sediment, and restoring our headwater floodplains should be a key priority for us at the legislature and as a state. To protect our water future. And the General Assembly has already invested in that. Over the last couple of years, through some of our federal dollars, we've invested $45 million into watershed restoration. I think on a bipartisan basis, understanding that forest health, watershed health is key to a lot of things, including our water future. And there is an unprecedented investment available now if we can draw down these federal funds to help our local projects, our state projects, and improve our watershed system. So that's what brings us to this legislation. And I look forward to the conversation that this webinar kind of is kicking off our stakeholder work on this bill concept. And I look forward to hearing from so many people who are on this call about how we can get this right. But at the end of the day, we do need a little more legal clarity on stream restoration projects and make these projects able to happen in more parts of the state. They're already happening in my district and in a lot of other people's districts, doing great work. But by having legal clarity for stream restoration, we can reduce barriers for these important projects to get off the ground and get going, and still protect water rights in our water rights system here in Colorado. And most importantly, draw down those federal funds that are available if we do this. So thank you for involving me. I look forward to working with all of you on this bill. Like I said, it's one part in the many things we need to do this legislative session to protect our water future. We know the urgency of this issue, but this is a great way, I think, to help benefit our local environments, benefit the people who live in Colorado and love our rivers and our streams, but also ensure that we are doing what we can as a state to stand up for our water future. So look forward to the conversation today and look forward to many more conversations about this concept and working this bill through the legislative process. So thanks for having me, Abby. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Senator Roberts. Thank you for your time this morning and your service to Colorado, particularly in our area of water. Thank you again. Up next, I would like to introduce Kelly Romero-Heaney, who currently serves as the Assistant Director for Water Policy for the Department of Natural Resources. Kelly has diverse experience in the private and governmental sectors as a consultant, a hydrologist, an environmental specialist, and wildland firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service. Kelly, thank you so much to you and your team for your leadership in seeking a policy solution that positions Colorado for this critical support for our functioning river systems, our natural water supply delivery infrastructure. When you're ready, could you share more about the history and process that brings us here today regarding stream restoration?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you to Audubon for hosting us this morning. Thanks to all of the legislators and interested stakeholders that are participating in the webinar this morning. And thank you, Senator Roberts, for really laying out the foundational need for this stream restoration legislation. I mean, as Senator Roberts noted, healthy natural streams are beneficial to us all. I mean, they're beneficial to the health of our forests, they're beneficial to habitat, they also help us to secure reliable, clean drinking water supplies, agricultural water supplies. So there's just such a host of environmental benefits that Coloradans depend upon that we see it's just critical that we make sure that we are minimizing barriers to this important stream restoration work in Colorado. Unfortunately, the majority of Colorado's streams have been degraded by 150 years of hydrologic modification, poor land use practices, channelization, mining disasters, pollution, climate-driven disasters such as catastrophic wildfire and floods and drought. And so the Coloradans of today have been deprived the benefits of healthy streams, largely due to damage incurred generations ago. Fortunately, stream restoration projects seek to reinstate these shared public benefits in a stream corridor that has been impaired, as you heard Senator Roberts talk about today. But under existing statute and under existing water law, proponents face an uncertain path when it comes to initiating and completing these important stream restoration projects. As compared to an impaired stream system that conveys water rapidly, if not destructively at times, some stream restoration mechanisms move water through a system less efficiently, mirroring the channel and flow complexity of a natural system. The timing of water delivered to downstream water users may be delayed as a result, and some restoration mechanisms will result in diversion of water and consumption, albeit limited and in times immeasurable. For example, a stream restoration project that reconnects a channel with its floodplain for good reason could also result in that surface water spreading out onto the floodplain, promoting the growth of riparian vegetation such as willows, alders, and cottonwoods. We know that stabilizing vegetation is very important for a variety of reasons, but all the same, they arguably may consume water through evapotranspiration. Although that type of project would be restoring a natural process, and again, very difficult to measure the impact, a water user may complain that the delay in consumption of water is an out of priority diversion. This shouldn't be allowed without a water court degree or plan of augmentation. Therefore, stream restoration efforts may result in complaints from citizens, litigation, enforcement, and that would really increase the costs, delays, and potentially likely projects being foregone altogether, and which would be unfortunate since these projects provide significant public benefits, really with limited impact to water rights. Simply put, the priority administration of stream restoration mechanisms under Colorado water law creates substantial barriers to restoring the valuable natural processes of streams. Stream restoration project proponents, water users, and water administrators need certainty about the types of restoration projects that can be implemented without being subject to enforcement actions. Therefore, the challenge before us all, before the Department of Natural Resources, the Colorado General Assembly, Colorado's water community, and of course, all of the citizens of Colorado that benefit from healthy streams, have to consider the benefits. We have to figure out how to consider the benefits of these restoration projects and develop an approach that recognizes the balance between stream restoration's large-scale benefits relative to the potential small-scale risk to water rights and the disproportionate cost and effort of acquiring and potential inability to acquire a decreed plan of augmentation for a stream restoration project. So, under the direction of the Governor Polis, the Department of Natural Resources convened an interagency team of experts to craft a legislative solution to this challenge. This draft legislation has been shared but not yet introduced. If you haven't seen it yet, contact myself or DNR's legislative director, Daphne Gervais. We're happy to get you a draft of what we're thinking. But I just want to be really clear that what we've drafted so far is a starting point, not an ending point. And so we're really wanting to kind of harvest feedback from you all, so we make sure that we're making the best policy possible. As drafted, the legislation would allow a stream restoration project to occur without a water right, as long as that project doesn't expand the historical footprint of the stream and riparian area. It's important to remember, of course, the stream is a system. So there's the channel, but there's also the associated riparian area and geomorphological floodplain, and that's a part of that. So if a project proponent can demonstrate through a view of aerial photos, historic stream surveys, the Colorado Water Conservation Board's fluvial hazard zone mapping suite of tools, or a whole host of other technical methods, if they can show the aerial extent of a natural stream before it was degraded, and if they can demonstrate that a project won't go beyond that, then that project can occur without a water right. The draft legislation requires that a project proponent file documentation with the Division of Water Resources. That information will be made publicly available on a website 63 days prior to commencement of a project. And if a water user believes that a project proponent hasn't met this procedural standard, then he or she can file a complaint with the water court of the district court, the water clerk of the district court. Ultimately, I mean, we feel good about this policy. There's more details that we're happy to discuss with you all. But we know that many of you on this webinar can really help us make it better. So again, we welcome that feedback. I will say the need for this legislation is urgent. As Senator Roberts noted, the Colorado General Assembly has invested $45 million in the last 2 years in watershed restoration for a host of projects, including and stream restoration is a component of that. And certainly water providers, conservation organizations, local governments have also invested millions of dollars in restoring our streams and need to continue doing so. At the same time, as Senator Roberts noted, we've got billions of dollars in the infrastructure bill for stream and watershed restoration in the West. And our neighboring states have already developed policies to allow for stream restoration to occur outside of administration, without administration, and we are at risk of being outcompeted for these federal dollars if we can't address this challenge, hopefully this session. I will say Colorado's system of water governance is the prior appropriation system, and it is a durable one, but part of what makes it durable is its ability to flex with the evolving needs of the people of Colorado. So in the 2023 legislative session, the Colorado General Assembly will be asked to carve out space within the prior appropriation system for our streams to be restored to their natural function. The legislature has to ask, will we allow their floodplains, our floodplains, to be reconnected with stream channels to allow riparian vegetation, willows, alders, cottonwoods to stabilize the banks and to provide shade to warming waters? Will we carve out space for our streams to naturally protect our water quality that's been so degraded, so that the future generations will have reliable access to clean drinking water? Will we allow our streams to will we allow our fisheries to be restored and safeguarded against the intensifying heat? of drought and climate change? And will we allow the restoration of natural sediment regimes so that diversion structures for farms and ranches aren't clogged with sediment and algae, and to help prevent the scouring away of farmland and grazing lands? So the Colorado General Assembly has an opportunity to set a vision for our state and the landscapes that have served us well for generations. And we have to remember that Colorado provides the headwaters for 19 states and Mexico, and we have a responsibility to store that water through our landscapes in a way that restores and maintains its environmental benefits. Colorado Department of Natural Resources believes that the time is now for Colorado to lead on this important issue. So we very much look forward to the continued dialogue. Thank you. Abby, I'll turn it back over to you.
Kelly, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing about kind of the past, present, and the future for stream restoration here in Colorado. Up next, I'm going to introduce two speakers that are going to be doing a joint presentation. This coming section of the presentation will cover how have Colorado's rivers changed over the past century, and why does that matter? And a kind of a review of the science and how healthy streams are a key climate change resilient strategy for people, and kind of what do these projects look like that we're talking about. So up next, we have Dr. Ellen Wohl, who is a renowned fluvial geomorphologist and a professor of geology with the Warner College of Natural Resources at Colorado State University. Her research interests include physical ecological interactions in river ecosystems and the implications of physical riverine complexity for organic carbon storage. Followed by Dr. Wohl will be Jackie Corday. Jackie Corday is the owner of Corday Natural Resources Consulting. She's a land and water conservation lawyer with over 2 decades experience of collaborating with numerous local, state, and federal agencies and nonprofits to solve challenges to natural resource issues with a focus on stream and watershed health. With that, I'd love to turn it over to you, Dr. Wohl, and to Jackie. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, Abby. If we could have the next slide, please. Yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of how things have changed in Colorado, mainly since European settlement. So we all know we live in a really beautiful and very diverse state. So the rivers on the eastern plains look very different than, say, the rivers in the mountains or the rivers on the western slope. And that's obvious, but it's important to keep in mind as we think about how these rivers have changed and what will happen in future based on our actions. But first, I want to say something just really basic about rivers. A river is not just a glorified canal. It's an ecosystem, I think, is the most appropriate way to think about it. And the water doesn't just move downstream. It eventually goes downstream, but there's a very strongly lateral and vertical component to that movement, as these arrows are indicating. So water is exchanged in the surface and the subsurface between the channel and the adjacent floodplain. And there's water that starts in the channel, goes into the subsurface for a little bit, and then returns to the channel. That's referred to as the hyporheic zone. I know it's a mouthful, but it's sometimes called the river's liver. It's very important for water quality. There are microbes in that zone that remove nitrate, for example. So it's important to think about these three-dimensional characteristics because most of our legislation all around the world that deals with rivers just focuses on the channel, not on the floodplain, but that channel doesn't exist in isolation. The health of the channel or the health of the river ecosystem is strongly dependent on those three-dimensional connections. So we really have to think about how the channel is associated with the floodplain and the underlying hyporheic zone. And again, if you think of it as not just a channel, but an ecosystem, there are a wide variety of plants and animals that are really dependent on what happens in that river corridor or that channel floodplain system, as well as us, humans. So if we have a healthy, resilient stream corridor, if we have heavy snowpack that melts quickly, or if we have a convective storm, there's extra water and there's sediment coming off of the adjacent uplands, a very resilient stream corridor can store some of that temporarily and kind of absorb the impacts of those extreme events. But many of our rivers look like this photo now. So they're degraded, they've cut down, and the banks have eroded. They're very flashy. When you have something like a convective storm, you have a flash flood and it moves downstream very rapidly, taking sediment with it, essentially eroding more of the banks. Instead of going out into the floodplain, if a river cuts down and widens, it's got a bigger cross-sectional area, it can just get the water downstream more rapidly. So you could think of it as this giant blue arrow, everything's moving downstream fast. In contrast, if you have a river that's still connected to the floodplain, this is an example of an old beaver pond that's been abandoned for decades. The active channel is out of sight in the rear of this photo, but during large floods, some of that water from the active channel will come into the floodplain and be stored in places like this pond. So it's a site that has a lot more habitat diversity. There's going to be more diversity of plants and animals, and this gradual downstream release of water, sediment, and some of the things that we really don't want to concentrate downstream, like nitrates or phosphates. So you could think of this as being more with its three-dimensional connectivity as indicated by these small arrows. Okay, so what did our rivers look like, say something like 200 years ago, before there was extensive alteration of many of them? Well, on the plains, we had highly seasonal flow, a big snowmelt peak for the rivers that head in the mountains and then flow across the plains like the South Platte or the Arkansas. The small rivers were really fed by convective storms, so highly seasonal flows, very broad, shallow channels. In the mountains, we had a lot more obstructions in many of the streams. There were a lot of log jams that would create small backwater pools, and there were a lot of beaver. Of course, that's what the first attraction was for many of the Europeans coming here, was for the beaver trapping. So there were large beaver dams and ponds. On the western slope, we had, again, highly seasonal flows. The water was naturally quite warm, and that really supported a lot of native fish communities that were adapted to those conditions. So when we think about rivers or riverscapes, many of us are used to thinking of one channel, and maybe it's meandering through a pretty valley, as you see on the left, but that's really simplified from what these rivers look like historically. The photo on the right here is more representative. There's a whole series of active beaver dams there. It's this channel floodplain complex that's highly connected in terms of water moving back and forth between the two. And you could think of the one on the left as something like a fire hose. That's an exaggeration, but anything going into that channel moves downstream pretty fast. The one on the right is more like a sponge. Things that come in there eventually will go out and continue downstream, but they're going to move more slowly. So there's more ability to retain material for short time periods. And a few more examples from different parts of the state. Some of these have been restored, such as the one on the upper right. So we can go back to these really healthy natural conditions that support a lot of ecosystem services. But what caused this to change over the last couple hundred years? Well, there were a lot of things. It started with beaver trapping in right after the Lewis and Clark expedition. And by the time Fremont came through in 1842, there were very few beaver left. Beaver populations have recovered in places, but there was a lot of beaver removal. Placer mining, of course, was what really caused, or metal mining in general, caused the population of the state to increase dramatically. And that was pretty detrimental to a lot of the streams, from the headwaters where it was occurring to the downstream areas that got excess sediment. There was widespread deforestation associated with the mining, to the point of complete deforestation in parts of the Front Range. That was also associated with the railroads like the Union Pacific that came through and needed that timber for ties. And simultaneously with the increase in population in the mining centers, of course, there was agriculture starting on the plains. That led to a lot of flow regulation with dams and diversions. We had urbanization, an old view of Denver, and there was channelization in many places. So what just appeared is the area that's now Camp Hale, as it looked before it became a camp. I think we lost the second photo, but that's okay. The net result, let's try that one more time. Is it? Yeah, that's all right. That's fine. It showed a very straight channelized stream. The net result of these alterations is that we have this much physically simpler channel and floodplain system. So again, very flashy flows. When extra water comes in, it moves downstream quickly. You are essentially concentrating all the energy associated with that rapid increase in stream discharge. So you have a lot more downcutting and erosion of the banks. These systems are less resilient to floods. Because they don't store water, they're also less resilient to things like drought and wildfire. They often have lower water quality. Sediment tends to have phosphate that attaches to it. There's nitrate that moves into and through these systems rapidly. There's higher stream temperatures that aren't good for our various species of trout. And at the extremes, you can have rivers that used to flow year-round that are referred to as perennial that are now intermittent, that dry up in the summer. So why does all this matter? Well, as both the two previous speakers have indicated, I think, in a lot of detail, we get a lot of benefits from healthy rivers. We can start with clean water. Two of the biggest concerns in Colorado are nitrate and phosphate. And if you have these highly connected channel floodplain systems, you retain a lot of that material. The phosphate you just store in the floodplain, but the nitrate can actually be removed by microbes in that hypereic zone. If we have more retention than when we have wildfires, which we keep having, you get a lot of water and sediment coming off the uplands in a wildfire. And if you can store that in the river corridors, even for a period of days to weeks, let alone months or years, you can really dampen or tamp down the extreme events like the Black Hollow debris flow that occurred after Cameron Peak and killed 5 people tragically. So we get the benefits when we have an extreme event like a fire or flood. And as we start to talk more about carbon banking and carbon mitigation strategies, there's an awful lot of carbon that is stored in the floodplains of these connected rivers. So an example of what happens when we don't have nitrate that's stored in headwaters, the eutrophication in Cherry Creek Reservoir, an example of a very destructive flow in the I-70 region or the I-70 section of the Colorado River. And then an example of a healthy floodplain, that's very black, organic rich soil with a lot of carbon and some buried logs in there. And one more example, this is a beautiful beaver meadow complex near Independence Pass looking down. And this is another beaver meadow complex that is in an area that was affected by the Cameron Peak fire. That blue arrow is supposed to show the active channel, which is at the rear. You can't see it in this view. So this is an off-channel pond, and it's full to the brim with sediment that came off the hill slopes in that first summer after the fire. And there are a whole series of these ponds along this channel. They're storing that sediment and they're going to release it more gradually. So again, the good news, we can do a lot with restoring rivers. There's been a tremendous amount of alteration, but we have the science, we have the ability to restore some of these rivers, to provide these functions and to give us more resilience. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Corday.
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, I love the positive note that there is good news, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, about the science behind that, a little bit more about why do we need to restore streams, and we've already talked about the benefits, but I'm going to go a little bit more into that. Next slide, please. So where's the science coming from? Well, there is an amazing amount of published work already on this, especially in this last decade. Amazing amount of hopeful studies showing we can restore these ecosystem and ecological benefits. And this came from a year-long research project that was part of a grant. I assisted American Rivers to get a grant from CWCB called Engaging West Slope Agriculture and Headwaters Restoration to Improve Water Security. And the first step that we took after we received the grant was we wanted to understand what is the state of the science around this topic. And that took a year, pretty much all last year. And we have this, it's available on American Rivers website. There is the link in the slide if you want to read it. But that's where some of this, what I'm going to be talking to you about comes from next, is that state of the science. Next slide. So you've been hearing about drought resilience, and so this is a slide that really just shows that so graphically. When you have a stream that on the left-hand side, the one that's labeled riparian, you're not getting that ecosystem service of slowing the flow and recharging the groundwater and all of the filtration benefits, because the water, as Ellen was explaining, just blasts through that system. And further up, the same stream further up in the valley, this is in South Park, looks like this. And that is the very essence of resiliency to drought when you see that picture on the right. You can think of it as there's our first snowpack, the one that we know is also critical to water supplies in Colorado, but you can see that this provides our second snowpack, and especially if we're able to restore those systems to be able to do that important function. Next slide, please. And this is an incredible slide I've used in quite a few presentations because it just really shows the hope of, if you can take that stream that's been so degraded and it's flowing down there in the summer, maybe 0.5 CFS, because it's flashed through and there's no riparian veg or left, it's nothing but dry sagebrush. If you can transform that back and restore it back to the picture on the right, that is the very essence of drought resiliency and hope that the science is showing us we do know how to do this, and receive all of these benefits back again. You can see that that's going to be much more resilient to drought, but it's also going to provide incredible forage for both livestock and wildlife, the restored stream. And that one came from NRCS. I just wanted to let you know that they've done a lot of research on this. Next slide, please. So we talked about drought. Now we're going to show a couple of slides on wildfire resilience. And the last few years have really provided us some incredible examples. Dr. Emily Fairfax has dedicated her scientific research to this topic in particular. How do healthy functioning floodplains survive mega wildfire? So this is a picture out of the Oregon bootleg fire, and you can see everything's burnt around it. But this healthy functioning stream that's completely connected to its floodplain, and there's a beaver complex in there, it survived. Next slide, please. And here's our own example right in our backyard. This is a large beaver complex that survived Colorado's 2020 Cameron Peak fire. You can see all of the burnt trees in the background and some scattered around in the photo in the foreground, but it survived. And that's the very essence of fire resilience. Next slide, please. This is another important thing that I found during the research. Dr. Susan Charney from the USDA Pacific Research Station dedicated many years of researching what are the benefits to ranchers, in particular in the dry eastern half of Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Idaho. She was looking for case studies where streams had been restored, beaver were allowed to come back in and help reconnect that floodplain and maintain it. And she wanted to understand what were the effects that ranchers were seeing. And the two highest ranked effects that they were really excited about was water and forage, availability of both more often. And so you had a higher groundwater table, improved stream flows, and for forage, you had better quality and quantity of livestock forage when that floodplain was reconnected, and that incredible diversity of plants came back. It was much better for their cattle. So that was very interesting, and all of this research is in that paper that I had mentioned. So next slide, please. So this is just a really incredibly visually impactful slide that I always like to just take a second on. This is again in South Park, a highway going right through the middle of two different properties. One side on the left, you see the stream running through and it's healthy and there's a lot of riparian corridor. So you're getting all those benefits that we talked about. And on the other side of the stream, it's all of that vegetation is gone. And that was probably decades and decades of grazing and not managing the cattle. But we know that the scientific studies have shown that managed grazing can restore that stream over years back to what it looks like on the other side. You can also make it happen a little bit faster with assistance with stream restoration. So that's just a stark reminder of we can see the changes in land management, and we can restore that to get all those benefits again. Next slide, please. So now I want to talk about, well, what does stream look like in different areas around the state? Because you're not going to be able to have the opportunity to restore the whole historic footprint in every circumstance. So this graphic on the top shows you the stream coming through the historic footprint. The floodplain is in orange, but you have a town and you have a highway. So then you look at that from the perspective of, okay, we want to provide more flood resiliency for this town. So what can we restore that is not impacted by development? And we'll look at how to do that. In another situation in the graphic below, you see you don't have a town. You've got this opportunity without the development to restore a larger part of that historic floodplain. And so that's how restoration practitioners look at it from the beginning. It's like, well, what is our recovery potential in each situation? It's going to be different. And so I'll just share with you quickly a few photographs that give you a better idea of those concepts. Next slide, please. So here's, all of you are probably familiar with the 2013 floods and how devastating those were and how much they changed all of the canyons along the Front Range. And they looked a lot like this picture on the left, with massive amount of boulder and debris that had come through. And so the restoration projects that started, of course, they have a footprint that's more narrow with what they have to work with. So you can see the highway on the right-hand side in the picture. You see the highway on one side and there's houses on the other side. But that doesn't mean that they can't restore some functions of the floodplain to help increase resiliency of that flood retention. And so what they did was pulled off those boulders, replanted riparian vegetation all along there, put in some erosion matting on one side. So at least they will get some floodwater retention going through that section. And again, on the bottom left picture, you see what the flood did. It brought the river, channelized it with all of that debris coming down, and it's now doing a hard right underneath that bridge, or hard left, and that's not good for the infrastructure. So they were able to move that back, take out all of that debris, and move the channel back into the floodplain so that it could spread out more and not come into that infrastructure at a hard right. So these are all very important projects to be able to have the ability to do. The next slide.
I apologize, but we are running close on time. Can we wrap very quickly? We have also Representative McCormick has joined us. So.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. This is just one more set of slides showing you the difference in being able to retain the flood waters to help protect communities downstream. So I guess I will leave it. I'll leave it at that so that we have time for Senator McCormick.
Jackie, thank you so very much. And I really appreciate that. So incredible information that both you and Dr. Wohl have shared with us. I really thank you for that. And I want to also thank very much Representative McCormick, who has joined us this morning in the midst of a very busy schedule. She is also a bill sponsor for the coming stream restoration legislation. Representative McCormick, welcome this morning. I'll give you a quick introduction here. Representative McCormick serves as the state representative for Colorado House District 11 and as chair of the Agricultural, Water, and Natural Resources Committee. Works to protect the future of our planet is one of her many profound things that Representative McCormick prioritizes in her work. And aside from her service, she's a practicing veterinarian for over 30 years. So thank you for joining us this morning and sharing your remarks on the importance of the stream restoration legislation and support. Representative McCormick, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Abby, and thank you for everyone for being here. I apologize I couldn't be on the whole time, but I did want to be able to help just bring it all home here. And I'm excited about this conversation. I do think that there are tremendous opportunities throughout our state, especially on many of our federal lands, to restore some of these functioning aquatic ecosystems that will have effects literally and figuratively downstream. These projects could benefit our open space, our fish and wildlife, all our outdoor recreation that just drives a big part of our economy, while at the same time restoring many of our watersheds. And our downstream users certainly will benefit as well from the improved hydrology that you've all shown. These pictures are amazing to see the before and afters, and to help reduce the effects of the floods that we've experienced, sustain that vegetation. I love what Jackie Corday said about the first snowpack and the second snowpack. That's really good terminology for people to understand what it is we're trying to do here. Also, the enhanced water quality through regulating the water temperature better, and the pH buffering, and all the removal of some of the things we don't want in our water, carbon sequestration effects that we can enhance. And then, like you saw in some of those photos too, the reduced sedimentation in downstream water bodies. I heard a lot from Greeley Water during or after the last big fire, and how they almost had to well, they did, I think, have to shut down. So it's really critical that we pay attention to how we can prevent some of these things. So restoring these ecological processes is really a way for us to be good stewards of our land and our water, and they provide a financially viable approach to recovering wildlife and the human benefits that come from these healthy riverscapes. We are dedicated to make sure that we have a wide array of stakeholders in this conversation, so that we all make sure all voices are heard. We do know that states around us, like Wyoming and Utah, Idaho, and Montana, have already set policy to address this issue. And it's time for Colorado to get on board with that. And we have those neighboring states that can guide us in how they've been able to do this. We do need to recognize the importance for how we address the climate change that's coming, the droughts that we are going to continue to experience. And we want to make sure that we lead to make sure we're removing these barriers to stream restoration while protecting the interests of Colorado water users. This is an everybody conversation, and I do look forward to being part of the process here, and to help at least on the House side with those conversations, so that we craft the best solution that brings all voices to the table. So I appreciate you inviting me, and glad I could get on to at least hear the end of the presentation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Representative McCormick. Thank you for your great remarks and for your time joining us this morning. As folks are probably keeping an eye on the time, we are slightly over, but for all the right reasons to share such good information this morning. I want to thank you again to all of my co-panelists, and to you, our audience, for sharing your morning to learn more about the coming stream restoration legislation. I hope you found this information useful, and we certainly welcome your feedback. To honor your time, we will go ahead and conclude this morning to allow legislators a few moments before they transition to the floor. And please do note the date for part 2 of the Stream Restoration Legislation webinar series on March 8th. We will circulate registration materials for March 8th, as well as a recording of this webinar from today. So thank you all for your time and attention this morning, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.